Hello, welcome to today's special edition of the Media Box. Today is a Halloween and a very spooky episode of the Media Box. This is just for you special viewers today. So in case you haven't seen the title already, I'm going to do a review of the soundtrack of Luigi's Mansion for the Nintendo GameCube. For those of you who haven't played the game or don't know much about the game, play the game. It's a great game. It's spooky, and it's also a Nintendo game, and it's Mario, so you know it should be pretty good. But the game is an action-adventure based game made by Nintendo for the release of the GameCube. It was the first game of the Mario franchise to be released for the GameCube, and also the second title in the Mario franchise to feature a main character, where Mario isn't the main character. Instead, it's Luigi. This great game was released as a launch title for the GameCube in September of 2001. That was in Japan, but in North America, it was released in November of the same year, and then in Europe in May of the following year. The game takes place in a haunted mansion. Ooh, spooky. But they didn't know it was a haunted mansion at first. But Luigi wins a contest he never entered, but then he tells his brother Mario to meet him at the mansion to celebrate, and then finds out that Mario is missing, so he ends up searching him, but with the help of an old professor named Elvin Gad, or as people know, Egad. Ooh, Egad. But going on to the soundtrack consists of a lot of music that was composed by Kazumi Totaka and Shinobu Tanaka. I don't know if I said that right, but seeing as there's no real track listing that I know of for this soundtrack, and some of these songs or sections have no real title for them, because they may just be like, you know, the main theme, outro credits, boss fights that may be unnamed, all sorts of stuff. I remember putting in this game in the disc tray, and the first thing that would pop up is, you know, the Nintendo symbol and all the, you know, crazy stuff that would pop up, you know, the studio that made the game. But the one thing that really stood out to me was that main voice in the beginning that really scared the living daylights out of me. That added a scary effect to the game and also the soundtrack. It said Nintendo in like a really like monotone kind of pitched voice. And it just scared the living daylights out of me, which is one of the few things that really scared me on the GameCube, other than, you know, the whole bunch of the bosses and stuff in Resident Evil 4, and also like the remake of the first one. The one thing that interests me about this whole track is the suspense that was added to a lot of the tracks by just using something simple such as, you know, a string section or some sort of, you know, creepy synthesizers that'll just like creep up on you, and it adds a lot more suspense to the game. And I can also feel it even while listening to the soundtrack online. Now, it was pretty hard to find the soundtrack just itself online. I had to do a couple, you know, Google searches. I had to do a few YouTube searches, and I finally found a few ones that were a little bit trustworthy but were in different order. That's why I'm saying there's no real track list for this. Now, one example that I'd like to show you guys about the suspense that I'm talking about with, you know, random string sections or creepy synthesizers added to songs to give it more suspense is this one here, which is called the menu track. So do you see what I mean? That string section just added so much more suspense to the track and made it a little bit more enjoyable as a track, and added, you know, that spooky effect that the game has to it, even though it's a kid's game and it's rated E. But there's also a lot of use of drum tracks set at a pace and having tracks of random noises, pianos, and all sorts of instruments. Now, I wouldn't consider these vocal tracks, in my opinion. I don't know what you guys would consider them, but, you know, there's just random tracks such as It contains Luigi's humming, like boo noises, and all sorts of just random stuff. And many of these tracks in this game, they're great examples of what soundtracks should be these days. A lot of playful experimentation of instruments to create catchy hooks, and there's also plenty of tracks that, while listening to them, are more or less all over the place, and have a scary synthesizer track to make the track have a scary, suspenseful feel to creep you out. And add a little bit of a scary-like appeal to a game that is, rated E, as I said. The use of occasional sounds, which isn't exactly any talking, is a track that I refer to as Luigi's humming. I'm going to show you that one too. Now, what I'm trying to get from these examples that I'm showing you is that the whole soundtrack altogether has no use of vocals, unless you're considering these noises vocals. And I'd like to close out to this review because it's short and there isn't much to this soundtrack, but it's a great soundtrack to a video game. I'd recommend listening to the soundtrack and playing the game, or just play the game and listen to the soundtrack. Now, in conclusion, what I'd like to give this soundtrack is a rating of 8.5 out of 10, simply because the game is pretty good and is also one of the biggest hits of the GameCube. And usually when these games are good, they have a lot of good elements to them, including the soundtrack, plot, the theme, the whole bit. And what I'm trying to tell you is that the reason why I gave it an 8.5 out of 10 is because it's a great soundtrack, suspenseful. It has everything that a great soundtrack should have, but it doesn't necessarily have that nostalgic feel to me. So that's why it's an 8.5 out of 10, and not like a 9 out of 10 or a 10 out of 10. Thank you for watching today's special Halloween episode of the Media Box. Be sure to check out the other Halloween specials from our host, Eric and Ian. Now check that out. Now, see ya.